Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar. We will be with you just after 1 o'clock. We'll get going. So we'll give people time to join us and then we'll get started. Grab a cup of tea. We'll be with you shortly. Thanks a lot. Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to the latest webinar from the National Youth Agency. It's great to have you with us. And my name is Lee Middleton. I'm Chief Executive of the National Youth Agency, and I'll be walking us through, as usual, the guidance this afternoon. Good afternoon, colleagues. Ooh, 1 second, just need to stop that. Yeah, so thanks for joining us, and it's a pleasure to have you along. I'm joined in the background by my colleague Abby, our Director of Youth Work, and Abby will be collating all your questions, and in the usual way, we'll pull out all the themes, and once I've done the presentation, she will put those key questions to me. I can see from the chat already there's been questions. We're live on YouTube, so if this is useful to you, give us a thumbs up. It helps us. It's nice to know that you're out there and you're engaging with us. And you can type your questions in the chat, and again, Abby will pick them out. Big thanks to our colleague Laura and Alex in the background who are making sure the technology works for us today. Also a big thanks to colleagues from DCMS who I know are also watching, who have worked really hard with us in what's been quite a difficult process the last couple of weeks. And a big thanks to officials there for their hard work. So I'm going to walk us through all the things that changed in our guidance. We published a new version of the guidance yesterday, version 6B. And 6B is a slight update, but I'm going to take you through all the guidance in the usual way. Sometimes people have said, oh, why can't you just give us the changes? The reason we take you through everything is because a lot of people will only watch the latest video once, and it's important that we capture all that information up front. So sorry, you got to listen while I take you through everything, and then we'll get to your questions at the end as well. I can see there's over nearly 400 watching, so welcome. Thank you for coming. So as always, the advice and guidance from the NYA, the National Youth Agency, is only for England. We are the body for England only. If you're active in Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland, you need to be conscious and taking note of the advice and guidance in those devolved nations. So everything we're talking about today only applies to England and activity that happens in England. If you're a member of a national association, and there are a few of them on the screen, but there are many, many more, you need to take note of your national association's additional information and guidance. They are there to help you. They are supporting you with what they're trying to do. So please, listen, take note of their guidance as well as ours. They may ask you to do other things or slightly different things, or in slightly different order to what we're suggesting. But we're all working incredibly closely to enable the maximum amount of activity within the youth sector. We published the latest version of our guidance. You can find this on our website, and you can't miss it. Frankly, when you go to the website, you get a big pop-up box that says, "Here's the guidance." So please go and do that. The guidance from the National Youth Agency is written by us, but it is developed in collaboration and partnership with Public Health England, the Health and Safety Executive, and the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. Increasingly, it's also being developed in collaboration with Department for Education, Department for Health and Social Care, and the Cabinet Office. Now, this only makes life a little more complicated, but it does mean that we're able to stretch the boundaries of what we're allowed to do as best we can. So our guidance is formal, government-backed and understood guidance. It is the same as guidance that schools get. It has the same weight in that way. So yeah, please use our guidance in that way. On our website, when you go to it, you'll find this big yellow bar, because we're now in the yellow phase of our readiness level, and you can click on that big blue button and it will take you to the latest documentation. Just before I go into the actual guidance ourselves, I just want to alert colleagues that we are undertaking the first national census of the youth sector, and this is the first mapping of the whole youth sector for over 10 years. And there are only 2 weeks left for organisations to complete your census returns. This is the most important thing you need to be doing right now in the next 2 weeks, is to make sure your census return is back. There are over 5,000 and a bit organisations who have yet to respond, out of a sector of not many more than 6,000. So I must ask you to do that. If you're a member of if you're a member of the Scouts, the Guides, young farmers, then you do not need to do anything yourselves, because and the YMCA network, they've provided us with your details automatically, so you don't need to activate. So if you're from the Scouts and Guides, etc., please ignore this message. But everybody else needs to go on our website or click and register. If you've pre-registered, then we've already sent you several emails chasing you, and some apologies for harassing you. But we've sent you some links to your own unique process. You click on that link and you can start filling in the survey. It takes about 20 minutes, half an hour. It is a bit of a bind. I do apologize. But the data from the national census is the most important tool we're going to have in terms of making the argument for further investment in youth services and youth work across England. We continually hear that there isn't enough information, there's not enough data to make the business case for investment. This is our one shot at getting us the maximum amount of data possible. So do us a favor, please tweet about it, please pick your phone up now, put on social media, encourage your friends and colleagues to respond to the national census, check other organisations in the sector are aware of it, have registered, are doing it, have done it, and we need an absolute massive team effort across the whole of the youth sector. Please help us to help you to help young people is my mantra. Thank you. We've also introduced a new safeguarding hub, and big thanks to our colleagues from Pharos who I've just been visiting this morning, who I know have been working with us on this, so hi to the team there. Safeguarding Hub is a new resource where we've put all the latest expertise and advice and best practice resources, guidance around safeguarding and risk management, and it's all in one place on our website. Go to our website, you'll find the Safeguarding Hub and Risk Hub there, and you can download all the templates, all the tools and resources, model policies, tons of information, over 40 documents and tools and resources. We're investing a lot more in the Safeguarding Hub. It will get busier and more clever. But for now, you can download all those documents, and everybody in the youth sector should be making sure they're following those best practice guidelines. So we are on the government's roadmap, and so we were hoping we've been having this webinar moving us to step 4, and obviously the Prime Minister announced on Monday that there's to be a delay to that step 4 process. That is, undoubtedly disappointing and frustrating for many. But what we have been able to do is to use the opportunity of the last couple of weeks to negotiate, to talk to government about what we think is safe and sensible, and to see what we could achieve. And we have been able to get some further relaxation of guidance. So that's great news, and we are here to support the youth sector as best we can. So as it stands today, step 4 is not looking likely until the 19th of July. They are going to put a sort of halfway in the next 4 weeks review, and that might change things, but we shouldn't bank on it. So the guidance that we've got for you is an update to the step 3 guidance. As we've said many, many times before, we still don't encourage you to go booking activities until unless what I'm about to tell you today means your activity can function and be a success. But do not plan things in the school holidays for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of young people, because there's no guarantees at all that we're going to be able to allow the youth sector to take 500 young people away en masse in the summer. It still looks a long way off to getting to that point. But we have got some good news around the relaxation for under 18s in terms of residential activities, and I'll talk you through that. So again, we don't want people wasting their time and their money, and we don't want to disappoint young people. So just be careful, and we still recommend do not book activities for the summer holidays, for example, or beyond, until you're really clear that your activity now falls within the guidance that we've set. So from step 3, which has been since the 17th of May, and this hasn't changed, but I need to take you through it all uniformly. All our online digital delivery is absolutely fine. We can continue to deliver detached outreach work, so do work in the local parks, youth workers doing detached youth work, practice, absolutely fine. We can work with young people outdoors, this is not a problem. One-to-one support for young people indoors is absolutely fine, as we've been able to do all the way through the pandemic. Local trips and visits are permitted, and there's no definition of local. Often we're asked, it's what can you do within a day that is safe and realistic. So, traveling 4 hours to the Lake District and back within a day is not necessarily appropriate, but an hour and a half away to do an activity or back, is probably practical. So think those things through very carefully. And since step 3, residential educational visits, so overnight stays, are now permitted, and those rules are changing today from Monday, so we'll talk you through them. As always, we've got to make sure we are COVID secure as a sector. The youth sector needs to be really focused on this, and we are constantly concerned that people are getting a bit fatigued and a bit fed up with the rules, and we're starting to let things slip a bit. We cannot let up at all. If anyone's been watching the BBC News this morning, the headline is the young people, and it is now our age range of young people, are those that are spreading and catching and having the virus more than any other part of society. Now, that's not surprising. They're not able to be vaccinated. They, are mixing in schools and in youth groups and other areas. But it is a concern of government. It is a concern of our health colleagues that the number is rising rapidly amongst young people with the Delta variant. And the Delta variant is 40 to 60% more transmissible than the original coronavirus that we got last year. And so, there is significant concern amongst medical and the scientific community around what the youth sector does, because young people are catching it and they are transmitting it, and and that needs to be minimized at all costs. However, we've got some good news. So we must make sure we're COVID secure. We've got to be really focused on this. And colleagues, again, I've said before, please don't look at the guidance and think, well, how can I get around that? How can I ignore that bit? Is there a way I can kind of fiddle the rules? There's no fiddling of the rules. Follow it to the word. Be responsible. That's our job. That's what we've all got to do. So we need to make sure our action plans are in place. That outlines who's got what roles and responsibilities, who's making decisions, how we're going to run our sessions, how we're going to run our residential, our activity. And we're really clear we've got a plan of approach to operate, but operate in a safe way and operate responsibly. We've got our up-to-date risk assessments. And if we're starting to now take larger groups of young people away, there may be different challenges, there may be different things to think through. Think about your transport, think about your activities. Free time is a massive challenge often on residentials. That's when things start to go a bit wonky. Really focus on using that, your risk assessment and going through that. There is support and advice in our safeguarding and risk hub on our website. If you need templates and things, you can go and download that advice. Groups and bubbles are still a thing. We can operate slightly differently to the original, as we were last year, but we still need to think about bubbles and groups. And there are, requirements for the numbers of young people that can go on residentials, the number of young people who should be in a bubble for sleeping and accommodation. And, even though under 18, when we're running our open access provision, there's no limitation on the number of young people who can come. We're still requiring you to put them into groups and bubbles. I've seen some comments in the chat about, well, why can a group of now 30 go away on a residential, but when they come to youth club, it's groups of 15. It's due to the nature of the activity. It's due to the nature of the spaces the sector operates in, and the challenges with village halls and corridors and things. It's very different. So it's also, we're not requiring testing, lateral flow testing, to run a generic youth project or a scout or guide group, whereas if you go on a residential, we are. So there are different safeguards which allow different size groupings. We need to make sure our hand hygiene is absolutely spot on. Lots of hand sanitizer. Soap and water is better, actually. Often we're told. 20 seconds washing hands, or if you can't do that because we're out and about, hand sanitizer is a good alternative. Making sure we are, really boring, but we've got to be making sure we're doing this continually. Every time we come into contact with people, we're using hand sanitizer. If you go on a residential, many times a day, we're going to be using this stuff, and it will be important. Keeping our venues clean and keeping them clean. So if you're moving between different groups of young people, deep cleaning as best you can. Those touch surfaces, door handles, they're the types of spaces and places where we need to be really careful about our cleaning. Face coverings are still need to be worn. They have not gone. Under 11s do not need to wear face coverings. Over 11s, unless exempt, do, as do staff. So we need to be making sure our face coverings are worn when we're not doing key activities. And we'll cover some of this later on. Social distancing still needs to be in place, even on residentials, even on those kind of key activities. 1 meter plus, still in place. And if your venue is open, each individual who's over 16 should now be using the NHS Test and Trace app and be checking into your venue. So those rules have slightly changed, so do keep an eye on those. But we're doing all of these things, then we're being responsible, and we're following the rules, and we're doing well as a sector. And I just implore everybody to keep up that good work, and we thank you for your compliance. So step 3, just to recap around types of youth provision for under 18s. Indoors or outdoors, open access for all young people. No limitations on who can come. You don't have to be, have any vulnerabilities or special needs. Anybody can come to provision for under 18s. There is no limitation on group sizes, but we need to be consistent as best we can around appropriate size groupings. Just to kind of give you some of the background, we've had a conversation with colleagues from Department of Health who were quite keen for us to limit the number of young people based on the square footage of spaces and venues. And we've said we've not implemented that. We've not gone down that road because the practicality of that would mean we'd be back to much smaller groups of young people coming together. And we don't think that's necessary. But, so we've got to be really focused around limiting our group sizes and working on this. This stuff is important. The health officials are still looking at this stuff and we continue to talk about it regularly. So please think that through. Social distancing face coverings are required, as I've just said. Over 11s should wear them. Under 11s can. There's nothing stopping them, but the law requires over 11s unless there's a sufficient medical exemption. So over 18s then it's a bit different. So over 18s can only attend what was known as a support group, and a support group is a legal term that's in the legislation. They can meet indoors or outdoors, but they are only for vulnerable young people and for young people who need, live in families who need support. But support groups, are still in groups of 30, and 30 plus your staff team. So, we can still meet as over 18s in groups of 30, but it includes staff. Anything that's not part of a support group just falls into the general public rule of a rule of 6. And so, we need to be a bit more aware of that. So day trips, let's just quickly recap our day trips. None of this has changed. So trips should only take place if the planned outcomes that you want to achieve cannot be done through any other means other than doing that trip. So if we're trying to give young people, team working skills, could you do activities in your scout hut, in your youth centre, in the local park, do your wide games, do your fun activities, do things that, provide that educational opportunity for young people that don't mean we need to go to a third-party venue or to a third-party space. But if you can't achieve those outcomes, then jump on board and go, please do and go do those trips and activities. We know young people are really keen to get back out there, do things, have fun. We're not trying to stop that. We're just trying to alert people that there is a risk in going and traveling a bit further, and you can mitigate some of that risk by staying local and by maybe not doing those trips if you don't absolutely need to do so. So if you're planning a summer scheme where you're going to have, you want to go and do lots of day trips and lots of fun activities, just think through, can you still achieve the same outcomes by not doing those trips? And if you can, we recommend that you stay local. Travel by minibus, taxi or public transport or car is permitted, and it could be a coach as well, I could add to this. And you can use every seat on the minibus, and that's not a problem. Young people over 11 should be wearing face coverings on your minibus or in cars, etc. Hand hygiene should be used. Everybody should be facing the same way. Windows, maybe crack them a little bit to get a bit of ventilation into the space. But you can use every seat and you can put young people together. I know in the past there's been sort of advice for public transport of using every other seat or trying to keep that meter apart. We recognise that's just not practical, and there is a practicality element of this. So you can use all the seats in the bus, but you should be using hand sanitisation. And best practice would be for trips to be using lateral flow tests before you go, and then everybody's in your bus as best has not got the virus, and we're being really responsible. It's not actually required to test people for day trips, but it would be super good practice. So all those standard COVID secure measures I talked you through, your risk assessments, having your action plans, being really clear about hand hygiene, etc., is important and needs to be made sure it's in place. But again, if you're going to a third-party venue, so if you're visiting, I always use the example of bowling alley. If you're going to go for bowling for the afternoon, you're going to visit a bowling alley. You may find that that is a public venue. Will require you to break into smaller groups. You can't stay as an unlimited size, which the youth sector may allow you to do. Our guidance says that's fine for under 18s, but actually the venue may say you need to be in groups of 6 because that's how they have chosen to manage the risk of the virus within their context. And you will need to follow their rules. You cannot go and say, well, we've got different guidance. You need to follow your third-party venue requirements. For example, if you're going outdoor learning centres, or you're going to a hotel, there is guidance from other parts of government on what hotels and accommodation providers need to put in place around how they serve food, how they manage restaurants or bar spaces. In our context, that might be a social space for young people. It could be the dining hall. It could be, how they run activities. Bedrooms. There are limits on the number of individual young people that can be, or any, members of the public who can be in a space to sleep overnight. So other providers are working through their guidance. It's a partnership between us and them, and we need to follow their guidance as well as our own. So, few things are changing from the 21st of June. So from next Monday, there is now age-specific requirements around educational visits and overnight trips. So for Monday, today, the same rule applied to under and over 18s. Now, yet again, we have tried our damnedest to work with government officials and colleagues to get, alignment between under and over 18. That has not been possible. And the challenge we have here is that the law, in legal terms, you are a child up to your 18th birthday and you're an adult after your 18th birthday. And in most legislation, the rule, there's a guillotine cut off, and we treat children very differently to how we treat adults. The same is applying to COVID-19 guidance and COVID regulations. So there are regulations that apply to adults that don't apply to children. So we can do more in the children's space than we're able to do in the adult space, the over 18 space. This is really frustrating for us. And the reason we delayed our guidance, so we had said to some people we publish our updated document on Tuesday, and then I put a tweet out saying we would delay to Wednesday. That's because we were working with the government's lawyers to really dig deep into the art of the possible. But it's been made very clear to us that there are over and under 18 rules, and at the moment they don't mix. Hopefully in the future they will, but right now they are different. And these rules affect travel and accommodation and the group sizes and what we can do. So I'm going to walk you through this. I'll take you through it fairly slowly, but I don't want to labour too many points for you. So again, all these COVID secure measures, I'm not going to run through them again, but need to be in place when we're planning and organising our residentials, when we're planning our activities. We've got to be really focused on these things. So from Monday, for under 18s only, groups of 30 young people are permitted on a residential. So we've gone from a group of 6, which included staff, to a group of 30 young people. But the other good news is that group of 30 does not include workers, carers, leaders. So you could take a group of 30 young people and 6 staff and 2 extra carers, and 38 of you are going away, and that is fine within the regulations, and that's fine within the rules. So this is good news for many parts of the youth sector. We will now be able to take a meaningful group of young people away, and our leaders and support staff are additional to that, which is great. It is still possible to take multiple groups away, but as before, those 2 groups cannot mix. They could use shared dining room spaces, but they have to have their own tables, or the whole thing has to be sterilised before group 1 and group 2, group 2 take over from group 1 in using the dining hall. Often you'll find providers are saying, right, this is your table for group 1 and that table over there is for group 2, and that's absolutely fine. But the 2 groups cannot mix. They cannot mix in free time. They cannot mix doing activities. They cannot mix in other ways. And each group needs to travel independently. So you can't take 2 groups of 20 and stick them all on a 50-seater minibus. You can't do that. You're going to have 2 vehicles of taking 20 each, plus your staff, and that's really key. We should be making sure that it's a requirement that we're using lateral flow testing. So before you depart, we're testing young people and the staff and any support workers, and we're also testing every 48, 72 hours. So about 3 times. If you're going away for a week, 3 times in that week, we're testing young people. We've been asked questions like, do I need to keep a log or a track of these things? I mean, I think you could keep a little register and a tick list that says the test has been done. But obviously, if a test comes back positive, that's the point where you need to take action. And, we can come back. We'll come on to that in a bit. You need to follow the venue you're going to's COVID secure requirements, social distancing, hygiene, face coverings, all those things are still there. So if you're on a residential, young people need to be wearing face coverings unless they're doing their activities. It's difficult, but it is what is required, and those hygienes are needed. Just one thing I wanted to just add, we've been asked by some providers that we might have a very large venue and we might want 4 groups of 30 from 4 different locations, or but could we have a common staff team that does, say, first aid? And that is acceptable. You can have additional support staff that provide, say, you have a catering team that does all the cooking and does the serving. That catering team shouldn't be more than 6 individuals, or you need 2 catering teams. And that catering team can't interact with the young people beyond serve their meal and let them go. They can't go and spend free time with them. They can't interact with them in other times. And your group of 6 in this example, your catering team, that catering team needs to be accommodated separately and treated like its own bubble, and they can only interact for the purposes really of doing their task. So if you've got a group of instructors, they can come and go, and they can work with the bubble, and they can work with multiple bubbles, but they can't stay very long. They can only do their activity. You might have a first aider that comes and goes as is needed. So some of these things are possible, but they need to be careful. If you're unsure, you can write to us at our guidance inbox. So it's guidance@nya.org.uk, and we'll gladly have a conversation. We've been picking up the phone a bit more recently, rather than just writing back to people where it gets really complicated, to try and help you navigate through this. We will try and help you, but it is possible. So the good news, under 18s, groups of 30. So, if you're running a scout group, you want to take 30 young people away, and a couple, group of leaders, people can camp. That's not a problem. Over 18s, we are still where we were before. And actually, what I should say is it's over 18s or mixed ages. So actually, if you're taking a group of under and over 18s, well, then we are still sticking with groups of 6. Which we completely accept is very frustrating and almost often rules the ability of doing these activities out. And unfortunately, this is the legislation we've got to work with. The total headcount also for over 18s or mixed groups includes your leaders and carers. I've got a slide to recap some of this in a second for you, but there's a sort of difference between the two. So it's over 18, still groups of 6, and that group of 6 includes your staff or carers. Again, multiple groups are possible, but they can't mix in the same way as I've just explained. You could take more than one group, but they've all got to travel independently. And you've got to use the same testing regime in terms of, before departure and whilst away. And you need to be following the same COVID secure guidance and requirements, face coverings, hand hygiene, social distancing. None of that has changed. So the challenge here is, if you've got, a group of 30, but 2 of them are over 18, then either those over 18s can't go and you've only got a group of 28, or actually you need to pick 6 if you want to include those 2 over 18-year-olds. So, and you need to add your staff in there. So you've got to think that through really carefully. So age now matters, and it didn't before, and it was quite straightforward, but now it really does matter. So if I've got for under 18s, here's my 30 young people, they're all very excited. They can all jump in the bus. You can use all the seats, face coverings if they're over 11, hand hygiene. People shouldn't be mixing around. They shouldn't be jumping around the bus, swapping seats to sit next to different people. We should be testing them before we go. So before at least half an hour before the bus departs, everyone's done a lateral flow test, jumped on, anyone positive hasn't departed, anybody who's negative gets to go, everyone goes and has a good time. And one of the things we do need to put in place is that for our sleeping arrangements, the legislation requires us to not be putting young people, and this would apply to adults as well, in spaces of more than 6. So no more than 6 young people per tent, so no more than 6 young people per dormitory or per bedroom, but there's no minimum limit number. That's for you to judge, but no more than 6 individuals. So if we're taking our group of, so here we go, we've got our group of 30 young people, and we're going to go camping, for example. We are going to need 6 tents to put 6 groups, 6 groups of 6 in those tents, and that's how it would have to work. And so, that's one of the things that we need to be working through, and thinking. And the same is for bedrooms, any sort of hotel accommodation. It does not matter. Whatever the space that is sleeping in, we need to be thinking that through. Now, we know the virus spreads in the air, so the larger the room, the better. The larger the tent, to some extent, the better. Though there's a practicality element of that. So, if you've got a 10-man tent and you can put 6 people in it, that's that's responsible. If you've got a 6-man tent, you can put 6 people in it. There's nothing wrong with that, but actually maybe you should only be putting 3 or 4 in it, and so that there's more space. So think these things through. For our over 18s, though, we can only take our 6 young people, and we've got our 2 members of staff here in blue as well. So this, much more restrictive. And again, the same applies in terms of they can all travel in the same bus, and they need to be no more than 6 per tent, 6 per bedroom, what have you. We've been asked some questions, and the logic makes sense, but the law doesn't allow it. So we've been asked several times, if I've got a really large venue and I could accommodate 100 young people in their own bedroom 1-to-1, so they've got their own bedroom, and that's their room, but I've got 100 bedrooms, why can't I take a group of 100 away? The reason is the law doesn't allow it, and you can only work in groups of 30. So if you've got 100 bedrooms, you could take 90 young people away and put them in 3 groups. To be fair, you could have a 4th group of 10. But your 3 or 4 groups of 30, cannot meet and not engage or work together collectively. You have to treat them as separate residential groups. So it doesn't matter how big your venue is, it doesn't matter how shiny it is, or whether everyone's got their own bedroom. That's fine. But the rules are groups of 30. So again, just want to talk you through if we've got more than 2 groups. So here's group 1, and this example was from before. So take this as our over 18 group. So we've got our 6 attendees. That includes some staff. They can jump on board bus 1. They can sleep in the tent or the accommodation. You need to be thinking through age-appropriate spaces. So and staff probably will need separate accommodation for safeguarding purposes, and maybe you need gender separation as well. You need to be thinking those things through. And then we've got group 2. They've got their own bus and they've got their own accommodation, and you can do this. You can have 2 groups, but they cannot work together. They cannot meet. They cannot do things collectively as a group. This is difficult, I know, but it is the rules. So just a few things around testing and, if someone becomes ill or shows sign of illness. So if a young person, shows sign of illness, they should be tested. And if it tests positive, they should be transported home by private car if need be. So this probably needs their parents to come pick them up and take them back. You couldn't put them in the bus with everybody else and tart them back. You should be avoiding doing that. If a member of staff is showing signs of illness, then we've changed it slightly, so the whole group would need to travel home if needed. I mean, again, test the group. If it's only 1 member of staff that's showing signs of illness and you're taking 30, so you've got many staff, well, then you've got a larger ratio of staff. Therefore, you could just transport that 1 member of staff home, and ideally swap them with somebody new if you can. If your ratios of staff to young people is becoming too small because that member of staff's had to go home, well then you're going to need to take the whole group back, and the whole thing stops there. And you're going to have to think this stuff through in your risk assessments, think it through very, very carefully. So when we've got larger groups of young people and we've got a lot more staff, there gets a bit more flexibility, but we've got to be careful. And you need to test the whole group, and you need to check, if other people are unwell, then they need to go home. Frankly, if it's one isolated individual, then they can probably go home. Retest everybody a day or 2 later. If everybody's in the clear, you can stay on trip. If you're getting more than a couple, then you probably need to pack up and cease your activity and go home. Just to be clear. Any individuals who are showing sign of illness need to seek a test and self-isolate. And I know some of the signs and symptoms can look a bit like hay fever and things at the moment. But so that's why we want you to be testing, before you go and regularly while you're away. And if you identify a problem, you can isolate and protect others from picking up the virus. Yeah, there we go. So a quick one on lateral flow testing. So yeah, all attendees of educational and residential experiences should be tested, every few days and before you depart. There we go. Test everyone before you leave. You can access free lateral flow testing from community testing sites. Now, plenty of you have written to us to say that sometimes it's been a bit difficult to get hold of these. We would then recommend you call NHS Test and Trace and explain your need and ask them how they can help you. I believe they will help you. I believe local authority testing centres will try and help you. But you're going to have to give them bags of notice. Please don't turn up with a week to go, say I need 200 test kits. They will struggle to get them. You're going to have to give them plenty of notice. So I would give them as much notice as you can that when you're going to need them. And then hopefully they'll organise those testing kits for you. There's also information on gov.uk around accessing lateral flow testing kits, and you can register. And so please do think about doing that if need be. Testing is absolutely our greatest defense against the virus, because if we identify someone's got it, they can isolate themselves and protect that spread. It's all about keeping that R number down. I probably sound like a public health official. I'm not. I'm just a youth worker who's spent too long looking at all the legislation and the rules. But testing is absolutely essential. Using those test kits, and take enough away with you so you can test while you're away. Anyone testing positive needs to seek a PCR test and then return home. One thing about insurance, we talked about this last time out. We are quite concerned that actually youth sector providers need to double check that the insurance cover they've got is appropriate for the activity they're planning to do. You may find some of your insurers decided they don't wish to insure residentials or trips and activities in the usual way because of the pandemic, or they will want to see your risk assessments. They want to see your planning and preparation. They want to be confident that you are doing what you're saying you're doing, and you're doing it effectively. And then you need to follow that really carefully. So work with your insurance company, and if you can't get if your insurance company won't cover you, you're going to either need to seek additional insurance from somewhere else, or you can't go. It's as simple as that. So again, our advice is do not book residential activities until you've got to confirm that our guidance now allows you to take those activities to take place, and you can get it insured. And please don't commit spend to hotel providers or activity providers until you're really clear that you're good to go. So, a couple of things on COVID safe measures. Leaders and workers are not included in the support group number for our under 18 provision. See, I got that wrong. Ignore that line, please. It's leaders and workers are not included in the support group number for young people and staff for provision for under 18s. Use of face coverings, hygiene and social distancing continue to be required. So you've got to use those things. Youth sector providers can offer back-to-back sessions if you're in your youth club or you're in your session, but you need to be, cleaning the building in between and being really careful. Sorry, I just point on that very first top bubble. Let me go back because I've got that wrong. This is talking about your day-to-day activities. This is not talking about residential activities. So it is absolutely fine to have a group of 30 young people over 18 in a support group, and your staff are additional to that group of 30 young people. I'm not referring to residentials here. This is referring to your day-to-day kind of in your community venue. You can work with a group of up to 30 young people who are over 18, but the staff are additional, just to be super clear. And apologies for confusing. Face coverings, hygiene needs to be used. Back-to-back sessions allowed, but clean the building in between. And community public venues can be open for the use of, providing support groups or youth activities, and the legislation allows that to happen. So, we're not hearing many community venues now not willing to open up for youth activities, but you are well positioned in the law to provide activities. Again, for the avoidance of all doubt, the use of private dwellings for the delivery of youth sector activities is not permitted under any circumstances. You can visit young people's homes on a one-to-one basis to meet young people, really high need, vulnerable young people, a home visit with the right risk assessments, the right safeguarding measures in place. And again, there'll be additional advice through our safeguarding hub on how to do that shortly. So, by the end of this week, it'll be published. So if you're unclear, you can go and have a look at that guidance. Moving to green. So we've been asked lots of questions. When are we going to move to the final part of our readiness framework? And at green, all of our actions at step 3 would be permitted. But the big measure here is when we would move to international travel being allowed. And at the moment, there will be no international travel across the education and youth sector until at least, I think it's the least earliest, is the 5th of September, and that could easily be delayed. So no schools or projects are going to be allowed to travel internationally as part of youth activity until the 5th of September. Now, what you can do as a family or a private citizen is very different to what you can do as part of a structured activity within the youth sector. But I want to be really clear, because young people, there's issue. We can't vaccinate young people in the same way potentially, because of the concerns that are in the news today about young people, spreading the virus and concerns around that. it is likely that there is still going to be some form of requirements upon the youth sector beyond step 4. And we will guide you through those, and we will relax them, and we will make the business cases to government, to the health officials, as always we have done, and we will always allow the maximum level of activity that is safe to do so. But there may well still be some requirements beyond step 4. But when the Prime Minister stands at the podium and says no restrictions from step 4, what he's talking about is, as a private citizen, in shops, restaurants, etc., there won't be a need for those things. That's when nightclubs, etc., can open. What they're not talking about is education and other forms of settings, which may well still have some restrictions, may not, and let's hope, but there may well still be restrictions. So again, all of the guidance and information is on our website. You can go there. There's lots of tools. You can watch these videos back. You can download the documentation. The new version was published yesterday. And there's also the link to get in touch with us if you need help and support. So my final plea to you, if you're taking notes about this, please get another red pen out and write national census, have I done it? And make sure your organisation has completed this. It's only open for a further 2 weeks, and there are about 5,000 organisations who have yet to even click the link. There's about 300 or 400 organisations who've started but haven't finished, and we need everybody to complete the census. And those of you that haven't opened it yet, please go and click your link and fill in your details. It will make a massive difference to young people, and it will make our ability to work with a whole array of partners, national partners, funders, to try and secure further resources, further funding and support for young people. And that's why we're all here, isn't it? So that's my bit finished, and we will now go over to questions. So hopefully in the background, Abby's been listening and noting down all the points and conversations. And Abby, are you there?
I am. Hi, everybody. Thank you. We've got an awful lot of questions, Lee. I don't expect we're going to be able to get through all of them, but we'll try our best.
Go on.
Okay, so the first point was really one about clarity, about how important it is that we adhere to this guidance. So can we just reiterate why it's so essential that we don't try to circumnavigate these points of guidance, please?
Yeah, very straightforward. You'd be breaking the law. So it's pretty clear. The legislation requires us to follow the regulations. Regulations are laid before Parliament, but they're also laid by ministers. So, the NYA navigates all that for you. So if you're following our guidance, you'll be perfectly within the law. But it's also the moral and responsible practice thing to do as practitioners, as people operating and acting in the youth sector. We have a duty of care to young people. We have a duty of care to communities to follow the guidance and the rules. And there should be no trying to circumnavigate anything. Because actually, if you're doing that, you're failing young people. You're failing the sector. The sector. We were able to argue for further relaxation alongside colleagues from the Department of Education, DCMS, because the sector is being responsible. The moment there's a whiff that's failing, they'll just tighten the legislation, and actually you'll just be allowed to do less things. So if you want to continue with the current opportunities, play the game, follow the rules. It's the only way. It's the law.
Thanks, Lee. So let's start with age groups then. Can we just clarify the under an 18 rule? Lots of people are mentioning the 31st of August date in the guidance. Can we just explain what that means, please?
Abby, explain that again. In what context?
So where there is the cut-off for young people being considered under.
Okay, yeah, sure. Thanks. So again, in legislation, there's a point in law where a young person becomes an adult, and it's that August date. So if they were born, if their birthday was prior to that date, they are still classed as an under 18-year-old in terms of the law and the legislation until the following year. So you can be an 18-year-old in certain, frankly, it's by a matter of weeks. You can be an 18-year-old where you can attend if your birthday fell before that date, because your academic, it's based on the academic years the schools use. So just be aware of the date of their birthday. If it falls before that date, then you're okay. Then there'll be a point next year where that date clicks up a year, and then they couldn't attend any further, or they're then treated as an over 18-year-old.
Thank you. So when it comes to mixed age groups, so under 18s and over 18s at the same event, can we just clarify what would happen there?
Yeah, so if it's a day activity, so I'll answer this in two ways. If it's a daytime activity with a non-residential element, then you're only allowed a maximum group of 30. But that does still include extra staff on top of that. Whereas for under 18s, it will be an unlimited number potentially. If it's a residential element, though, that's when it gets difficult, and you're back to your maximum group of 6, and that group of 6 includes your under and your over 18s, and it includes your staff, which I get is frustrating, but that is how it is.
Thank you. There's been lots of questions about whether there's likely to be a fire break at the end of the summer. Have you got any information on that?
Yeah, so we did an extra webinar a couple of weeks ago about large-scale summer events, and one of the things I talked about was, if we tried to protect education restarting in September, would the government require us to not do residentials or not do activities in the last 2 weeks of the summer holiday? There has been no mention of that since, and we do not believe that is a risk any further. So there will not be a fire break at the end of the school holidays. We will get the whole 6 weeks. I mean, don't get me wrong, never say never, and if the virus, there's a new variant and things totally change, that might be different, but there is no conversation, there's no active conversation at all with any officials or health body regarding a fire break for the youth sector. So I think you can ignore that concern anymore.
Thank you. Okay, so some questions about average youth work activities rather than residential to begin with then. Can you just clarify the points that you were making about bubbles and how bubbles should currently be used?
Yeah, so for our under 18 daytime activity, or it can be in the evening, of course, but non-residential, you can have young people come into your youth club or your centre or your scout group, and there's no limitation on for under 18s on the numbers that can attend, but you should be putting them into consistent groups. So that's consistent week to week. And it's also consistent, ideally, with their school bubbles, and they should be operating in, again, bubbles of 15 whilst in your centre doing your activities. So you might have 45 young people come to your session, and you need to try and put them into 3 different groups. And those 3 groups can do the same types of activities, but you should be trying to be responsible in terms of not mixing the whole group up. The goal with this is to prevent the spread of the virus. So if you think of young people going to school, then they're in their school class bubble, and their school class bubble navigates around the school as a bubble, lunch as a bubble, does their activities as a bubble in terms of their lessons, etc. The same applies but there are lots of classes within the school. The school might have, 20 different classes if it's a secondary school. Same is trying to be applied to the youth sector. So again, we can have as many as we like through the door, but we're trying to put them in consistent groups so that if there's a problem if a young person has, COVID but doesn't know it, but later discovers they've got COVID, it's only the bubble of 15 that they were in at youth club that we've got to worry about. We haven't got to impact the whole 45. And that's the plan.
Thank you. Lots of questions about whole family activities and what guidance should be followed or what numbers should be followed if it's a whole family activity.
I think there's too many variations of what that could look like. So is that youth sector activity, or is that a group, is that a family doing something? And there are separate rules and what a family can do. You can have 2 families and interacting, etc. Again, the same would apply in terms of group sizes. So if you've got mum and dad there, they're over 18. You've got your groups of 30 as a maximum. You've got a rule of 6 in certain circumstances. So I think if that's a concern to you, I would be write to us at our guidance inbox, and we'll have a look at it.
Thank you. Okay, a couple more about general activity and then some residential questions. So we've got a question about indoor sport and the wearing of masks. So would there be an expectation that young people that are engaged in activities indoors sport-wise still wear a mask?
Yes, the mask could be removed whilst playing sport, if it's a team sport. So let's define sport here. So if they're in a sports hall, running around playing football, then they can remove their masks while they're doing so. Make sure there's great ventilation, open the fire doors, the windows, etc. That's really responsible thing to do as well. But if they're on the sidelines, if they're on the subs bench, they need to have their masks on. They need to have their face coverings on. It's only whilst engaged in the activity. When the young people come off the pitch, if keeping with that analogy, then their mask needs to goes back on when they're no longer playing that activity.
Excellent, thank you. Do you have any information on drama performances? So if young people are involved in sort of amateur dramatics performances, would they need to wear a mask while they were performing indoors?
Right, so amateur dramatics is actually quite a complicated space. So you're only allowed 6 on stage at any one time. Face coverings, I think, can be removed whilst doing the actual performance, but if they're in the wings, that should be worn. And there are also licensing requirements. So if you're selling tickets to parents to come, or if it's in a licensed venue, if you're using a theatre space or a regulated licensed venue, you need to contact your local authority licensing, because it's a child employment licensing team. If the child isn't earning any money, there still needs to be a license for the venue to do those activities. Actually, quite a complicated space. I was talking to the head of the chair of the National Child Employment Group around this week. We will probably try and put something together and put that out to the sector to help with that. So, but in general terms, in a youth club, it is absolutely fine to do a rehearsal, plan a piece of drama. It's fine to be in a choir and to do singing inside a youth club. If you want to then perform and you want to present that to an audience, then you're only allowed 6 on stage. And you need to be following. There is advice and guidance for amateur dramatics, which is on gov.uk, and you need to follow that too. And that advice and guidance will talk you through any licensing risk. It's a bit of a complicated space, is what I will tell you.
Thanks, Lee. So people can kind of check with their local authority as well there. Brilliant. Okay, so what about providing food, meals and drinks? Is there any additional guidance for that?
Yeah, I saw some of those. We've been saying this for quite some time. You can provide food and drink. It's not a problem. It's just about making sure they are. I mean, I'd probably single-use containers, or you've got suitable method of washing it all up. Use paper plates if you can. Let's try and be a bit eco-friendly here. But what we're trying to avoid is that the cross-contamination through joint sharing of utensils. So I wouldn't be offering a buffet and then having a pair of tweezers that you pick all the food up with that might have lots of individual hands touching the tongs. You need to think pre-packaged food and provide it in a way that means there's not lots of people interacting with it. But it's absolutely fine to do cooking, to provide food and drink, to support young people in that way. Youth work does a massive job around food poverty. Absolutely fine to do it. Just think through, how do we prevent the spread of the virus through that activity?
Thanks, Lee. Okay, we'll start to move on to some questions related to residentials. First thing, there's lots of questions about lateral flow testing. Some people saying they're still struggling to get access to lateral flow tests from their local centre. Is there any advice on that?
Yeah, as I said before, if you're struggling to get hold of them, I would ring NHS Test and Trace. Their number's on the, Google it, you'll find their number. I don't remember off by heart. Explain what you're wanting to do, and they should help you navigate that and to get them. There are ways of having them shipped directly to you, but you have to have a lot of them, and you have to be an employer. So, that's not a problem at charity. An employer doesn't mean you're paying people either. So having a team of volunteers means you can be an employer, but they will ship them to you. But contact NHS Test and Trace, explain what you're trying to do, but give them plenty of notice. I think the thing that we're discovering a lot is people saying, we go tomorrow and I need 200 test kits, and your local test centre just won't have them and won't be able to order them in time. So give them plenty of notice, talk to them, go and visit them. We'll pick up the phone and speak to them, and they will help you. But if all else fails, call NHS Test and Trace. But, give them 2, 3, 4 weeks notice if you can. I mean, do not be thinking about this at the last minute.
Thank you. What about lateral flow tests for young people aged under 11? Where do we stand on that? Yeah,
so we don't need to be testing under 11s, and, it's only for over 11s. There's nothing stopping us doing tests for under 11s, but noses are and tissues can be quite sensitive. So, we've got to be a bit more careful. We're not recommending that the need for testing for under 11s, it is only over 11s.
Thank you. An interesting question about lateral flow test proof. So how should youth providers be checking that young people have had a negative lateral flow test before they come and engage with the activity? So should they ask to see proof of that, or should they just take it at face value?
Yeah, so tests are only required when we're doing a residential, so they're not required for day-to-day activities. So I think, as I said before, get them to come an hour before you're due to depart, do the test on site in front of you. You can then see what the result is, record it on a register sheet if you need be, and then you know that you've got confidence that the test has been done and appropriately, and then jump on the bus and go and have a great time. There's nothing stopping you. If a parent says, "Oh, they did a test at home and it came back negative," I mean, you can take that on trust. We're not here to try and sow doubts in across communities. But the safest and best way would be to just get them to do it before you leave, because you'll have organised the testing kits. Probably you'll have got them. So ask everyone to come, spread out in wherever you are, get them to do the test. It takes 15-20 minutes, depending on 15 minutes to half an hour, sorry, to complete the test. And then when you're confident they're all negative, off you go and have a great time.
Excellent, thank you. So on a residential, the welfare staff, so instructors perhaps, kitchen staff, etc., do they have to stay in a bubble of 6, part 1, and part 2, can those staff work across different groups of young people during a residential?
Yeah, so again, depending on who's providing the service. So if you're going to a third-party venue and they're doing the catering for you, it's not your problem to what group that member, those staff team are in. It's for the venue to sort out. If you're a church-based group and you're going away and you wanted to take multiple groups of 30 and you wanted a team of staff that would do the catering, then we're saying that you should put those as a group of 6, and and that group of 6 should be accommodated separately, socialized separately to everybody else. They can interact with each group and they can interact with multiple groups for the purposes of the job they're there to do, whether that's to do the climbing activity, whether that's to do the catering, whether that's because they're the first aider, that's also fine. But the goal is the point of this is their interaction is less. They're not there as part of your group of 30 or with your staff team. So they are coming in, doing their thing and going again. And they can be together as a group if they're, say, the catering staff, but they should not be coming in, doing their thing and staying with you to see how the next activity goes. They should be stepping back out and going away.
Thank you. So how many members of staff could you take with you to do a residential? So how many over 18-year-old staff can be with you with your 30 young people?
There's no limit. I mean, just be practical and reasonable. What do you need to run a safe and enjoyable event? I mean, classically, look at the ratios of young people's needs versus the ratio of staff you've got. So, I've done residentials with some very high needs, young people with special educational needs and disabilities who needed one-to-one care. And in fact, one young man needed 2-to-1 care. So we took 10 young people, and I think I had nearly 15, 16 staff. We had a doctor and a nurse as well for us. So, all those 15, 16, if that's the type of activity you're aiming to do, then you can take a substantial number of staff. But they've all got to have a role and a purpose. And the thing is not to take more than you need. But you can, there's no technical limit.
Thank you. On a residential then, does there need to be social distancing still continued within the bubble of young people that you have taken?
Correct, yes.
What about in dormitories or sleeping arrangements? Do they still need to be socially distanced at that point? So beds appropriately separated, thinking about camping, etc.
I mean, the reality is that's not going to work, is it? So if you've got a tent, they're going to be less than 1 meter apart. So ideally, yes. Practically, do your best.
Thank you. And so would they need to wear masks when they were asleep?
No, so you don't have to wear a mask when you're asleep. I couldn't, no.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
If you're on an airline, you have to wear, you've got to wear a mask the entire time of your flight. That does not apply to us. You can take that off when you're asleep.
Brilliant. What about if you're doing a residential that also combines some day activities? So some young people stay, some young people go. As long as the number doesn't exceed 30, would that still be an acceptable bubble size?
So yeah, what you can't have is a residential group and then a day group. So if you're the residential group, you're all there, you're all staying over, you're all part of a fixed bubble, job done. What you couldn't do is have 20 that stay over, sleep over, and 10 that just come for the day. The problem is that 10 have gone home, mixed with their family, mixed with other people, because that's what happens when we live in families. And then they've returned the next day and then they've mixed again. So the goal is to keep the total exposure level to a smaller number as possible. So you could have a group of 20 that stay away, and you could have a group of 10 that do day activities, but they have to be completely separate.
Thank you. Okay, last two questions. We've already overrun, I'm afraid. So question one is large activity days. So not necessarily residentials, but people talking about doing large community-based events. Are they with 100, 200 young people during the summer? Are they likely to be allowed?
I don't know yet. I think that's too early to tell. You could do your groups of 30, but you couldn't have the community. You couldn't run a fete, for example, and have the community come and go in the same way. Not under youth sector guidance. So at the moment, I think that's all too early to know.
Okay, thank you. Last question then. There's lots of people asking about what's likely to be, what are the likely changes if we move to step 4 in July, and when we might know what they're going to be. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so we will probably learn in the usual way. So the Prime Minister will stand at the podium 1 week before the change is due to take place, and he will announce that we're moving to step 4. That is the first anybody gets to know about this, including us. The media usually gets a bit of a leak, so we get a few hours head start, but we don't get we don't get weeks and weeks head start. This time round, the NYA and the Department for Education and others, we wrote multiple different sets of guidance documents for different changes, or sort of modelled what might be possible or what could happen, so we could move quickly when we got that clarity. The same will happen again. So we will alert and update the youth sector as fast as possible, but it's not likely to be less than a week before the change takes place.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, the other part of that question was any ideas what's coming? No. I mean, hopefully there's the same rules for under and over 18s, and there's no need for bubble sizes might be larger or not need to be a bubble size, but truth is we've no idea yet.
Okay, thanks, Lee. I think we've probably run out of time. We've gone 5 minutes over. Hopefully we've managed to cover most things. Obviously the guidance inbox is still open, and we'll be able to answer any questions that we haven't hopefully covered today.
Brilliant. Thank you, Abby, as ever, for your support in navigating all that. So, colleagues, as before, please go back and do your census return. It's the most important thing we need you to do. If you're really grateful for the effort the NYA has put into helping you navigate COVID-19, then we'd be really grateful for your help to help us navigate the next, beyond COVID-19 for young people. So please do take a look at that. And just a huge thanks. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're not a member of the NYA network, go on our website in the top corner, you can register, and that way you'll get our newsletter and our information. The NYA network is expanding shortly. You'll get a lot more tools, resources, and support from us for free. So it's well worth registering there. And as always, thank you for joining us. Thank you for following our guidance. We are doing our best. We are working with really good people, trying so hard to get the best opportunities for young people. We really are grateful for your support, and yeah, have a great week and enjoy your residentials if you're able to do them. Take care. Thanks a lot.